One of the things that keeps me sane in times like these when my Hurricanes are down is getting the perspective of former Canes players. And we got a good one coming up.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free. How much does the show cost? Nothing. We're free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Going to bring back a good friend of the show. We could see his face this time, and the amazing, for those of you watching on YouTube, he's got the amazing throwback Florida Marlins hat, former Miami Hurricanes offensive tackle Rashad Butler. Rashad, you are looking well, man. How you feeling these days?
I'm great, man. Outside of my Miami Hurricanes, I am great. No complaints.
No doubt about that. And okay, maybe you didn't see this so much when you played for the Canes because that was during a pretty good time in their history, early 2000s. But I'm sure you saw this at times with the pros. What does it look like when players start to check out mentally? And do you see any of that happening with these Canes? Like, does it look like some of these players are checking out?
I don't see that right now, and I hope not to see that throughout the remainder of the season. What it looks like is when players check out, it's just a lack of effort, consistent mistakes, not only from one individual, but from a number of individuals. And I do see mistakes, and I do see consistent mistakes from certain individuals at certain times. Whether those individuals have checked out or not, I can't answer that question. I hope not. But as far as for the majority of the team, I don't see any of that as of right now. And I hope to not see any of that again for the remainder of the season.
And there are certain instances where maybe some of these individuals keep making mistakes. Like, Miami's got a certain running back who's lost 3 fumbles in the last 4 games,
Mm-hmm.
yet they keep getting a lot of playing time. And I think part of it just is this team doesn't have a lot of depth, and a lot of their depth is injured right now. But then you do see like another running back, Thad Franklin, didn't get any carries or any snaps last week. Supposedly he's healthy. So I wonder if maybe, he might be in the doghouse for some reason. And we're not watching practices. They don't open those to the media right now. So I don't know what's happening. But like Rashad, and every coach is different, I guess. But, and Mario a little bit because he was on the staff when you played at Miami. If you do get to a point where maybe you're not performing consistently in practice and you get into that doghouse, how hard is it to earn your coach's trust again?
It's very hard to get out. And being within that culture and within that building during the great times, I do know that practice is everything. It was stressed to us on a daily basis that you play exactly how you practice. That carries over. Now, the level of competition, depending on the players that you have on your team, could be greater in practice than it is in the game. And for us during those years, we had better players in practice than a lot of the teams we played on Saturdays, maybe outside from the Florida States and the Virginia Techs as far as those type of schools. But I do know Mario, and I know Mario has preached that. And if players aren't performing the way they're supposed to perform in practice, which is giving great effort and understanding, most importantly, what they're supposed to do and how they are supposed to go about doing it, then he's not going to play players. And I think people and fans have to understand that, whether fans have an interest toward wanting to see a certain player play. Well, if that player isn't giving the proper effort and isn't showing the mental capability to do what he is asked to do throughout the week, then I don't think that player deserves to play. I mean, I believe in that philosophy as well.
Yeah. And it coming off a catastrophic loss, we've had a couple of those already this year.
Mhm.
How hard is it for an entire team to bounce back from something like that, Rashad? Now, you didn't suffer too many losses when you were at Miami, but I'm sure, and obviously the Fiesta Bowl was a whole different thing. You were on that 2002 team, but that was, national championship game, final game of the season. Like you come off a really tough midseason loss like this. How hard can it be to bounce back from something like that?
In the case of where Miami's at right now, I think it's very difficult because I think the players know that they are in the midst of a very, very arduous, and I use the word arduous because I want people to understand rebuild. It's very tough, and it's not going to be pretty. And I think that I don't want to say the mental psyche of this team has been shattered a little bit, but I think it has because we are in an age where uh, media is more accessible to players rather than when I played, we didn't have Twitter. The only thing we had was Facebook, and Facebook, wasn't the monster, the giant that, it is now. So, we really couldn't see what the media was saying unless we picked up the newspaper. And a lot of the times, a lot of us was like, man, we're not picking up no damn newspaper. But these kids have, Twitter and Instagram and all these other social apps, right at the palm of their hands. So they're able to read what is being said about them and about their team. And I think a lot of negativity has been given towards certain players and the team. And do I think that a lot of it is warranted? I do, because I think if you aren't playing well, then people within the media, they do have the opinion to say what they feel, because that is their job. Now, as far as the way they say it, I don't always agree with it, because I think sometimes it can become very harsh and very disrespectful towards certain players, and just the, I guess, just the landscape of the team. But that is their job.
What would you say outside of the Fiesta Bowl in '02? Because that's obvious. What did you feel was the toughest loss you suffered at Miami? Like the one that was really like the biggest gut check moment?
Ooh, man. I know a lot of people may expect me to say the LSU, but see, I'm gonna be honest about that. that loss in that game. Going into that game, we just knew from a player's perspective, whether a lot of us were leaving, and for the ones that were returning, whether it's for their
Was that
final
your
year.
last game?
Yeah, uh-huh.
Okay, I thought so.
2000, and it was actually, I think, 2005. Yeah, like this late December 2005. I think we played that game December 31st, 2005, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but I know it was in 2005. We knew that, changes were coming. I didn't think massive changes were coming, but I knew changes were coming within the coaching staff. So the landscape going into that game was, a little different than any other game I went into playing at Miami. But to answer your question, to me, would have to be the Georgia Tech loss, because I think, um, for me, I believe if we didn't lose that game to Georgia Tech, we probably would have been headed for a date for either USC or Texas that year, because those were the two teams that played in the national championship, and we felt that we were just as good as either of those teams. But when that loss occurred, it just really, I want to say, kind of took us down a path that we weren't able to really untangle from. But yeah, that game still to this day really bothers me, because there were mistakes that were made in that game by a number of players, including myself, up front along the offensive line, quarterback position, running back position, receivers, you name it, defensively. I mean, I think everybody can take blame for that game not going the way that it should have went, because for the majority of the game, I felt that we were in control of the game, even though the game was going back and forth. I just felt that we had the upper hand more times than none, but they just happened to, make more plays than we did down the stretch, and they pulled off the win, the
Yep.
upset.
That's well said. And a lot of us, I don't know if Rashad's in this category, maybe media people and fans, but a lot of us maybe didn't want to admit what a rebuild this was going to be, or we just didn't want to see it, like how tough of a rebuild this is for Mario Cristobal in Miami. So I've got a lot of questions for Rashad Butler about that to give us a player's perspective on what this rebuild is going to take. I also want to ask Rashad about Miami's very banged up offensive line and about the quarterback situation. If Jake Garcia is going to be the guy here for a while. So make sure you keep it locked. We have a lot more for this former Miami Hurricanes offensive tackle coming up here on Locked On Canes. Guys, I'm a South Floridian and I'm a dude and I sweat a lot. I probably sweat way too much, or at least I used to. I would get those embarrassing pit stains. Sweat Block, though, they changed the game for me. Allow Sweat Block to change the game for you. Sweat Block was created by a doctor to help with his own sweating. So it's doctor created and doctor recommended. If you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, and it's always embarrassing, try Sweat Block and you could save 20% with promo code locked on at sweatblock.com. Also available on Amazon. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. I'm Alex Donno alongside former Miami Hurricanes offensive tackle and a good friend of mine. I'm so happy he can be here with us again, Rashad Butler. Rashad, let's talk about Miami's offensive line a little bit because I think that this happens really team wide with how badly they're performing. We always try to figure out, okay, how much of this is on the players, on the coaching, and also the depth, right? Because Miami's been decimated up front. Zion Nelson, he may not play again this year. Like Mario Cristobal had said last week, we're taking it slow with Zion, who's probably Miami's best offensive lineman when healthy. Early this week, Cristobal basically said we may not see him again this year. Ja'Kai Clark has been banged up. Everybody's been getting hurt on that offensive line. Like, how much more difficult, Rashad, does it make to find any continuity when you're constantly rotating different guys in and starting different guys at, the type of position you played?
Listen, that situation right now is, I hate to say this, but, I'm an honest individual, is very horrific because I think you went into the season, and I'm just being honest, I'm giving my honest opinion, understanding Mario and knowing what type of offense he wants to run and what type of guys he wants up front and the characteristics and attributes he wants from those guys. I think, Miami came into the season having guys that necessarily didn't fit exactly what Mario wants to do because Mario, he comes from a philosophy where he believes in, I call it the Mike Shanahan and Gary Kubiak zone scheme, zone running scheme, to where he heavily believes in the outside zone and tight zone. And in order to run that type of scheme, you need offensive linemen who are more lean, more agile, and more have more mobility, because that offense is geared as far as side to side rather than, push directly forward or up the middle. And I think Miami over the years, whether it's been, going back to Al Golden or going back to Mark Rick, and even now, even after Mark Rick with Manny Diaz, the offensive line has been geared towards power, big guys that have girth, that have, a lot of mass that is trying to press upfield. And I think knowing Mario, even during his time at Oregon, I mean, he had some bigger guys, but if you look at the majority of that offensive line at Oregon over his tenure, he had guys that were more lean, guys that were more agile, guys that could get out and move in space because that's what he wanted to do, and he was very successful at it. But, in saying that, unfortunately, when you're a coach that's coming into the situation that he has been pressed to come into, you have to work with the guys you're giving because fans are not going to want to hear that excuse, and I understand that. And I think he's done that, but I mean, he's just been dealt a bad hand with guys just going down. And now, when you have guys that go down, like you just mentioned, you lack continuity. I think continuity is one of the most important things, along with having players that, fit the skill set of each position that you have them in, continuity is right up there as far as, on an equal playing field. So now he's forced to play guys that he probably didn't want to play this year because, again, he's the coach and he's in practice, and he's probably seeing a lot of these younger guys not perform the way he wants them to perform or believe they can perform on a consistent basis, in order to play them on Saturdays. But now you're pressed in a situation with injuries where you have to play these guys, and now you're just like, man, I know that this guy isn't ready, but I have no choice but not to play him.
With Miami dealing with so many injuries, some people will try to point the finger at the strength and conditioning program. Is there any tell for that? And obviously you're not the strength coach at
Mhm.
Miami, but like can maybe like an overly vigorous S&C program, can that cause more injuries? Have you seen that happen?
That's a fine line. I think, when it comes to the strength and conditioning program, um, it does matter. And I think if players are being overworked, the strength and conditioning staff should see that and should make changes. And the coaching staff should see that and make changes. And, more importantly, the players should say something about it. And hopefully the strength and conditioning staff can, can take listen to what the players are saying and make changes. But I understand when you're in college, um, I guess the level of say isn't as strong as when you're a professional. So I don't see any players going to the strength and conditioning staff and saying, hey, maybe we need to taper it down, especially in a moment like this, because, in college, when you're not winning, coaches just want players just to, I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it, just shut up and just listen to what I have to say. And, I'm going to get you better and you're going to do, what I'm instructing you to do. And again, like that's the only thing, or only, I guess, say that you really don't have any say, but like that's the only thing you can do when you're in college compared to being a professional in the NFL.
Not every rebuild is created equal, because we see certain first year head coaches doing a bang up job. I mean, Miami just lost to a first year head coach at Duke, right? Everyone is wondering, like, how come we can't be like Lincoln Riley at USC?
Mhm.
Some people have brought up, what about Dan Lanning at Oregon? I think that's a terrible example, because it's one thing to take over from a coach who was fired, because that probably means, hey, the team's not very good if the coach got fired. Like Lanning took
Mhm.
over, a team that, that Mario Cristobal left, and he left the cupboards well stocked, right? I mean, they had the top recruiting class in Oregon history just 2 years ago, 2021, or less than 2 years ago, I guess, the players that are now redshirt freshmen and sophomores. So he left them in good shape. So I want to ask you this question, because obviously on paper, Miami has a much better looking coaching staff than last year. So how come a lot of these same players were seemingly doing better and winning more games last year than this year?
This is that was a very loaded question, but I'm going to answer it the best way I can answer it. Um, I'm going to be frank. I just don't think the players that Miami have right now at the majority of the positions, offensively and defensively, are good enough for what Mario wants to do. As far as offensively, which I mentioned earlier, and as far as defensively. Now, when it comes to the defense, um, I really don't. I really never, I guess, looked at exactly what Mario wants to do as far as his defensive philosophy. Because let's be honest, he played in the Pac-10 at a time where, a lot of schools in that conference really weren't known for playing exceptional defense. But I
Yeah.
do know that where Mario comes from, as far as the University of Miami, he wants to have guys up front that can get after the passer. And I think he has that right now. But I know that he is going to address, him and Alonzo Highsmith as far as that linebacking core and that secondary, because I do think, those two position groups need to get stronger if Miami wants to be stout on defense and if fans want to see the Miami defense that they saw, in the early 2000s. And as far as offense, I just think that they have to get leaner up front. They have to get more agile and more mobile up front. And I think from, a running back position, I just think that he has to get the running backs that understand what he wants to do, because I do see some great physical traits in a lot of the running backs they have. I just think that Knight needs to do a better job of holding on to the football. I mean, that's on him, and I do like the promising group. I do like on offense. I'm going to be honest with you, and it's so funny because this group took so much heat coming into the season, and even last year, is the wide receivers. I think that he has a great young core that, with more game reps, you're starting to see that they're gaining more confidence. You know what I mean? And they're starting to play better individually, and they're starting to play more as a unit. From the quarterback position, I like both. You know what I mean? But I know Mario, the way college football is now, and even the way the NFL is turning into, you need a quarterback that is able to threaten the defense, not only with his arm, which I think Tyler Van Dyke has shown he can do, and Jake Garcia has shown he can do as well. But you need a quarterback that can threaten the defense with his legs, especially on third downs and in the red zones. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, Tyler can't do that. I think Jake can do that better than Tyler can. But I like the young kid. I can't think of his name. That
Jakari Brown.
Yes, I like him, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised, and this may be a hot take, I wouldn't be surprised next season if he is not only battling for that starting job, but he wins that starting job, because I do think that's the route that most college teams are going to have to go if they want to have a chance to be successful. Like, you need a quarterback back there that can threaten the defense with his legs as well as his arms. I just don't think Miami has that right now consistently, because I know that's exactly what Mario wants to do, because again, he's had it at Oregon, with Justin Herbert. I mean, Justin Herbert is a tremendous athlete, and I don't think Justin Herbert got enough credit for being able to make plays with his legs, even though he chose to make plays with his arms more so than his legs.
Well, I got a couple more important questions to ask our friend Rashad Butler. I do have a follow-up on the quarterbacks, and I need to ask Rashad, because he's been through the recruiting process before as a player. How do you sell a program that's struggling this much? So keep it locked right here to Locked On Canes. Guys, you should know this by now, that our friends at Bet Online are providing so many valuable services. They've helped me out on so many college football Saturdays, so many NFL Sundays. Bet Online is your number one source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season. My Miami Heat are down bad. We got to bounce back there. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information, with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. Guys, live betting is a game changer. And also, if you're trying to beat the sports books, don't just do it yourself. You need to get information, and BetOnline has all the resources to help you beat the bookies. It is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and even golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And guys, make sure you are checking out Locked On Sports today. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Back here on Locked On Canes, Alex Donno alongside former Miami offensive tackle Rashad Butler. So you were talking a little bit about the quarterbacks there, Rashad, and I do expect Jakari Brown to be getting more work in some of these situational plays, short yardage and stuff, because he obviously has better legs than any other quarterback on the roster. With Tyler Van Dyke hurt, Jake Garcia, I think it's going to be the starter for now. And Jake, he's down right now. That was overall a poor performance against Duke. Threw a couple of touchdown passes, but the 3 interceptions were really, really bad. It looked to me like he wasn't prepared for that game. What did you see from Garcia, and do you think he can bounce back this week against Virginia?
I agree with you on that last point. I don't think he was fully prepared for that game, and I think that's on him because, as a backup player, you have to prepare yourself as a starter. Now, I know fans may say, well, shouldn't some of that blame be placed on the coaching? No, because, as a backup, you know that at any moment you can possibly be a starter with, an injury. And that's what happened. So, I put the blame solely on Jake Garcia as far as not being prepared fully the way he should have been prepared. Now, I understand that backups don't get the same reps in practice, live reps going up against a scouting unit that starters get. But at the same time, you're still watching film and you still have the same game plan that starters are getting. So it's up to you to be, ready just in case if you're called upon. I just think for Jake Garcia, what it looks like for me is that he needs to calm down. He plays so, I don't want to say erratic because that's the wrong word, but he just plays, I see, with so much emotion. And at the quarterback position, that's great in certain situations, but more times than none, you have to be the calming force because you're the only one that's speaking in the huddle. And if players see you riled up all the time, in crucial situations, that may make them riled up. And let's be honest, some players don't perform well when they are riled up in comparison to others. So I just think he needs to calm down. And I think, having a full week of practice, knowing that he's the starter and getting the live reps against the scout team or scouting unit, I think is going to do him justice. And I do look for this offense to, how can I say it? I think that you're going to see more so moving forward what Mario wants to do offensively because now he has a quarterback that isn't hobbled by the ability not to run. Because let's be honest, Tyler Van Dyke, is not a runner, and Mario knew that. Gaddis knew that, and the game plan that was built for Tyler was more so let's feature his ability to make good decisions with his arm and showcase his arm, which makes sense because again, I mean, if that's what you have to work with, I always believe you focus on the strengths of your players rather than focusing on the negativities. And I think with Jake Garcia, now you have a guy that can throw the ball, maybe not as good of a passer as Tyler Van Dyke, but more of a runner than Tyler. So I think moving forward, you're going to see exactly what Mario is going to want to implement moving forward with this program.
So last thing I want to ask you, because obviously if they're going to transform this program, you have to get the type of players in recruiting that fit the attitude and fit the system, but you also want to get good players who fit the attitude and fit the system. You're trying to land some of these big time 4 and 5-star blue chippers. Some of them are already committed. We hope they stay that way. They're going to be trying to get others. You've been through the recruiting process before, Mr. Butler. Like, how do you think they can sell on these players that, obviously right now the team is not good at all. So how do you sell the future on these recruits?
Ooh, that's tough because we do know we are in an era now where what really matters to a lot of these kids are the current results that they're seeing each and every Saturday, and pretty much the accommodations as far as the facility. And one thing that Miami does have going for them is they have a brand new locker room. The facility, for the most part, is gorgeous. It's beautiful. But I think for Mario, and I think what Mario is doing is pretty much going into these households and presenting the future business plan. Saying, listen, right now we are not where we want to be, and we know that we are disappointed, but we knew coming into this season that this was going to be a tough season. But at the same time, this is my plan moving forward. And I feel that you as a player, and I'm just saying this as far as him speaking to players, that you are one of the guys we targeted at such and such position that we like, that we feel can help this program get back to the program that a lot of us loved, in the 80s through the early 90s and even through the early 2000s. I think that's the best way that Mario could spin what is going on right now with the struggles of the football team at the present moment.
Words of wisdom as always, and the perspective I need. Like, I need this in my life. I'm so glad we've been able to chat this week with people like Rashad and like Larry Bluestein. Make sure you follow Rashad Butler, former NFL and Miami Hurricanes offensive tackle, at Rashad Jamal B on Twitter. Can't thank you enough, Rashad Butler. Have an awesome weekend coming up, and let's hope Miami wins this week.
For sure. Let's hope.
Go Canes. Guys, make sure you make Locked On Canes your first listen every day. Make Locked On ACC your second. We will talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team